Let's talk about ports again. God, I love ports. What could be more fascinating than scaling down an incredibly technically advanced Sega arcade classic and making it work on an 8-bit home console? Well, quite a few things to be honest, but I still find them fascinating all the same. In this video we're going to take a look at 5 well-known Sega arcade classics and see how well they did when downscaled to the Sega Master System. Afterburner is a game that simply shouldn't work on hardware this underpowered, but my god did this port succeed when others have failed miserably. Okay, so the scenery isn't as detailed, the rotation of the horizon isn't nearly as smooth as its arcade counterpart, and we've lost control of the Tomcat's speed, but somehow, above all odds, this actually plays pretty well. The action is thick and fast, you can actually see what's happening, and you can still lock onto enemies and fire homing missiles at them. That's basically the core Afterburner gameplay locked in. If you had this back in the day, you'd be pretty happy with your purchase because this is pretty much as good as it gets on an 8-bit. Shinobi is another port that once again suffers from the decrease in colours and graphical fidelity, but it still manages to put forward a damn good port of this Sega arcade ninja 'em up. A great new addition to this port is its inclusion of a life gauge which helps mitigate the rock-hard difficulty of the original, and its one-hit deaths. The only real letdown is the slowdown that occurs when you jump between the high and low platforms, but it's not a major issue as the brilliant game design shines through and makes for a great port. Outrun is probably a little too advanced to work on the Master System as the wonderful smooth scaling of its dense roadside objects is completely absent here. The change in elevation on the track also makes it impossible to view oncoming traffic, and cornering on inclines is also way too difficult. Certain scenery like tunnels also locks the road in place, giving you more lateral movement of the Ferrari, but it makes the control feel a bit weird. But it's still not a terrible port, and the more lenient time limit certainly makes up for its failings. It's quite a pretty game as well, even if the roadside objects are a little on the thin side. Oh boy, this Golden Axe port is a real doozy. From what I've heard, the way this port mitigates sprite flicker is by using the background tiles to draw the enemies, and while it certainly works to some extent, the hit on performance really spoils the overall experience. The scrolling is very choppy and the whole game feels very slow and unresponsive. We also only have a single player experience with Axe Battler as the only available character, but he is enhanced with the ability to choose all 3 of the magic styles from the arcade original's character selection. It's not a terrible game, but it's certainly not the best way to play Golden Axe. And finally we have Wonder Boy in Monsterland, which is probably the most successful port in this lineup. Almost nothing is lost in the transition from arcade to Master System, and the gameplay is identical to its bigger brother. It even looks like the arcade game, with only some minor loss of colour. This is easily one of the best ways to play this legendary action platformer, and once again it changes the difficulty to be a little bit more manageable, so you'll often find yourself making more progress than you would in the arcade machine. Bosses are definitely a less daunting prospect, taking far fewer hits. It's just a fantastic version of an already fantastic game.